Ok, 3, 2, 1, ladies and gentlemen, benvenuti a una nuova puntata di Tintoria, il podcast di Daniele Tinti. Tonight we have a very special guest. You have seen him on 30 Rock, you have seen him on Netflix with the stand-up comedy, and now you can see him in Trastevere trying pasta. Ladies and gentlemen, Judah Friedlander.
Good evening. It's great to see you.
Great to see you.
It's great to be here in Rome.
Well, it's great that you're allowing us to have this podcast here.
We're in a restaurant.
Yeah, we're not gonna say the name.
Eating
we don't
just
give
before
away.
just before they close.
Yeah, just before they close.
The place we were going to meet at didn't let us in. They said they were closed.
Yeah, fucking
They
Tonnarello.
sent us across the street, and they're open. The food's delicious.
Well, that's great. This is there's Stefano Rapone is also here.
Hello, hi.
I forgot.
Hello.
I forgot to introduce. So
Yeah, you did.
Judah is in room because he will have a show on Friday night at Parioli Theater because you are touring with your new stand-up comedy special, which is called
Future President.
And
I think I might have to be the next president
I think
of the United States.
If
I might even go for Italy too.
Yeah, you should go for Italy.
Because I know you guys got some problems yourself.
We got some real problems. I think.
Well, you have a solid history of fascism in your country.
Yeah, we got maybe
And,
the best fascist
we invented
history.
it,
We
so,
invented
yeah,
it, not
we're
to
proud of
brag,
it.
but
Yeah.
Top three. Let's call it top three.
yeah, but we invented. If we can, if we can take
You invented
pride.
fascism.
Yeah, we did invented fascism.
Pretty cool.
This is something that we don't like to brag about, but actually. Mussolini
One thing,
inspired
yeah.
Hitler. One good thing that we did in the last
we did
century.
something
Yeah,
good.
no.
We exported it.
He was Hitler's role model.
He was Hitler. What?
He was the role model for Hitler.
Yeah, he
of
was.
course. Yeah.
He was. He really was.
How do you say fascism in Italian?
Fascismo.
Fascismo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same with a no at the end.
With a no at
like
the end.
everything in
Yeah,
Italian.
there's a lot of O's. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got a good country though, man. I know
We
times
Thank
are
you.
tough, but you got a good country.
we do our best because
thank you.
like even in these dark times it's still pretty good.
Yeah.
We really can't complain. So okay, when I asked to do the podcast, I didn't really want to talk about politics or all the stuff because
Hey, it's your podcast.
Yeah, no,
you
but-
talk about what you want to talk
yeah,
about.
it's usually not very political.
Yeah,
it's
that's
mostly
cool.
It's mostly about comedy. I'm a huge fan of your previous special.
Thanks, man.
America is the best country in the United States.
America
It's
is
the
the
greatest
greatest country in the United States.
Yeah.
And you cannot argue that.
It's
There is no way you can factually argue that.
You cannot attack
that we're the best country in the United States.
That's
you can't
true.
argue that.
That's true. I will add some cheering at this part.
Very cool.
And so all my questions
Yeah.
are comedy related. Which now some of them feel preposterous because in this environment starting like. So how do you start? When did you start?
We can also talk about food.
Yeah,
you know, because
we
So
should-
tell me, ask me any question. I'm here for it,
Yeah.
man.
Okay, so how do you like Italian food so far?
Well, I've always loved Italian food,
Okay.
so I'm now here in. I get to try it in Italy
Yeah,
because in New York we have a Little Italy,
yeah, I've been
and
there.
that's why I always call you guys Big Italy. This is Big
Yeah, of
Italy.
course.
Yeah.
It is. Well,
is.
it's
great.
It is Big Italy. I hope you will enjoy the food. And actually, you performed in Milan yesterday, and you will perform in Sardinia next week.
No, Saturday.
Saturday, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Stefano will be opening.
Opening for
And okay, so
the channel.
because you have been doing stand-up comedy for 30 years, I've seen
Yeah.
some interviews. And okay, first question, that it's really interesting to us. How did it change in 30 years? Like, do you think it changed a lot culturally doing comedy in the US and around the world? Like, for instance, this political correctness. How it changed it for you, if it did, and how you felt the change in the comedy scene?
Well, as far as political correctness goes, I think there's pluses and minuses. You know, when I first started in '89, and there was definitely more bigoted stuff being done then.
Okay.
You know, just openly making fun of gay people, people from other countries, just openly. I mean, really bad. And there's less of that now. It's still there,
Yeah.
but there's less of it. And with the politically correct stuff, I mean, even in my act, here's the thing, when it comes to the politically correct stuff, I take every incident, every issue individually.
Okay.
Because I don't give a blind statement, the politically correct people are always right, or the people who say they're for free speech, they're always right. Sometimes they're both right. Sometimes they're both a little wrong. Sometimes one side's right, or sometimes that same side might be wrong. So, like, a lot of times I think the PC people actually have good points to make. Sometimes referring to a whole group of people by a name that they don't like, maybe don't call them that.
Yeah.
It'd be like if someone just decided to call you Jeff, and you're like, my name's not Jeff, don't call me Jeff.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, I want to call you Jeff.
Yeah.
You probably wouldn't like that, So, same with some other things. Now, sometimes the PC people, I think, or the PC movement, whatever you want to call it, they overreach, and it almost becomes fascist in their policing of the language. And then the other thing that I don't like is when people, the cancel culture, one person says one thing and someone takes it in a bad way. That person did not mean it for that person to take it in a bad way. And then that person is basically like, fuck you forever.
Okay.
And you can never redeem yourself. That's not healthy either. So I think something that needs to be done is to look at things honestly and with nuance and with layers. And so many times people don't do that. So I support the PC movement, but that doesn't mean that I agree with it 100% of the time. I support free speech, but sometimes when people say they're for free speech, sometimes they're dishonest. They actually don't want free speech. They just want to
Say whatever they want.
or just do bigoted or racist things, but they won't call it racist. They'll just say I'm for free speech.
Okay.
But they're not being honest. Now I am for free speech, but I think if someone is doing intentionally bigoted, racist, or sexist things, they should be honest and say that they are being racist and sexist, but they usually aren't. So it's a very, and we're also in a world of fake news. So you have to look at everything, and we're also at an age of branding. I think especially in America, we're in a very narcissistic age. Like almost everybody are not honest. I think most people are not honest, and it's a big problem. Even in like dating, for example, people will say, do you got game? It's like, why is it a game? Why is dating a game? Why can't it just be honesty? Two people being honest with each other. Two people go out and then afterwards they decide, when is it okay to text that person back? And what should I say? I don't want to text them back right away because then I might look like I like them too much, or I might look at where's the honesty? There's no honesty anywhere anymore.
Yeah.
So many times people who are on the PC side or the not PC side, they're actually not being honest in what they're talking about. So I think when people talk about truth and fake news, I think it's not just the president of the U.S., the current president, who's doing fake news. Fake news is almost everywhere you look, on a personal level and on a corporate level and a national news media level.
Yeah. Because the PC stuff, it's interesting to us because
So I want to just interrupt for one second.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So I just remembered I didn't really answer your question.
You didn't? Oh no, yeah, you didn't. Sorry.
So in my act now, I actually have several minutes of material where I'm actually making fun and satirizing the over-policing of language, and making everyone feel guilty for everything they do. So even though you might feel afraid, comics might feel afraid or hindered or blocked by the PC movement, you can still, in a smart way, talk about that. and I satirize stuff with that.
Okay.
But then I also satirize, the far right and the mainstream middle, which I think is also a big part of the problem. But so it's just something you have to deal with, and something you have to, I think addressing it head on is that's what I do. I don't be like, well, fuck the PC guys. I'm just going to keep doing, now I'm not talking about me, but I'm saying, comics in general. I'm going to keep doing stuff that they say is racist or sexist. It's like, well, maybe it actually is. You got to think about it. And so I in my act currently, I satirize some of the stuff that the PC people do, but then I also have material that is, most of my material is very pro human rights. So they would probably agree with all that stuff. So, but anyways.
Okay,
I think I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. So you didn't really change the way you do comedy. You just you now interact with the fact that there is PC in the world.
Sometimes there's the fear that you might tweet or say one thing and then your career is going to be over.
Yeah.
There is that fear out there which wasn't there before, and some of that is not the PC movement; it's technology.
Yeah.
It's that. Twitter is a mix of good and evil, I think, the website, Twitter. Because it's about mob mentality. Twitter, it's named after birds all flocking to something. They're often flocking to a dead carcass that they're going to eat, and that's often what Twitter is doing. It's just like car crash. It's like all these car crashes, and everyone's just going to the car crashes to look and then say nasty things about things. Like sometimes I've actually tried to discuss things on Twitter, just to discuss a serious issue, and almost everybody tweets back just nasty, awful stuff. And I'm like, I just want to have a conversation, and you're being terrible, So that's new. The social media stuff is really new.
The social media fear of saying something that may trigger the whole... Because that's interesting to us, I think, because in Italy, it's not like that. The pasta is great. Fantastic. That would have been very shameful if you didn't like the pasta.
That was for the meatball.
Yeah.
That meatball was incredible.
That's great.
I tell you, in New York, it's difficult to find a good meatball.
Which is a shame. It should
First
be...
of all, usually it's tough. You actually have to use a knife to cut it.
Okay.
And I'm from the school, when it comes to eating, you should never have to use a knife. Meat should always be tender enough that you don't need a knife.
Okay.
That's where I come from. Now, the other thing they do in New York often, they only use beef in the meatball. They don't use pork and veal. So, technically, they're doing it wrong. It's incorrect. I don't know if that relates to the PC movement at all, but...
It does.
It's fucking serious
It probably
shit.
does.
Another part of the question he asked, right?
Yes.
How did your kind of comedy change, when you started, and how it is now? There are jokes that you, if you read your old jokes, you say this is terrible, or maybe.
Well, I would hope I've gotten better, and I definitely have.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also older. I started when I was 19, and I was a young-looking 19, so it was, persona was different. I always did a lot of one-liner jokes. I always did a lot of crowd work. Always did both of those. The persona has changed a lot. I don't think I was doing satire when I first started, not for several years. But I always had twisted, dark sense of humor. I always tried to find comedy in places and create comedy out of places that you wouldn't think there was any. I was always attracted to that. So that really hasn't changed. And in the past 10 years or so, I've really been doing a lot of satirizing. People can call it political. I don't, because I'm not... I basically satirize how America and the world and American government deals with all the different human rights issues that are going on and government oppression and hypocrisy. So I don't really call it political, but you can if you want. I don't have a political agenda. I'm for human rights, and I think most governments, no matter who they are not.
Yeah, or at least they say they are, and then. Well, in Italy they don't even say it. It's fine now. They don't even have to say it.
Yeah.
They don't even pretend. And because that's in Italy, like the whole politically correctness movement never got to us. You can still say.
I'm not surprised.
You can still say whatever you want, but even in a bad way. Like it's good because you can say whatever you want, but it's bad because you can still say whatever you want against anybody. And some people on Twitter will say, "Oh, that's bad," but then nothing happens. Your career won't be over. It's not.
On the contrary, maybe it's.
Yeah, maybe it's better. Maybe that's a
I mean,
political agenda if you say something
I mean,
racist.
you can also look at things that everything is political. You know, being political is political, and saying you're not political, that's also political. You know, it all depends on how you look at things.
Yeah.
But sometimes, you know, the real problem I have with sometimes people on the PC movement or people not in it is the inability for people to think and analyze. Many people can't do that, I think. So sometimes people will hear, "Oh, that's a bad word. I was told that's a bad word. So everything you're saying is bad." But you might be doing a joke about how that bad word is a bad word.
Yeah.
But they won't even let you say that word. And that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
You can't even talk about something in support of the people who are called the bad word. You know what I mean? The oppressed group of people who are being oppressed by bad people. They may be upset if you do a joke about those bad people and criticizing them because you said that word. You know, so it gets a little.
Yeah.
You know, there's no thought going on here. You have to look at what the intent is. So.
With this kind of mentality, do you feel like sometimes you have to censor yourself because you're afraid of the reaction, even if you think that what you're saying is right? Or
sometimes, but I think there's always a way to. There's always a way to get your point across. You know, there's always a way, and you know, you just have to be smart about it. You know.
Okay, long question, so
Yes.
I will let you eat.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen in some interviews that it's not the first time that you've been performing in Europe, and now again you performed, I think, in Lisbona and in Italy. And so, do you think from like you're an American comic, do you felt like there's a different type of comedy in different countries, or like even from Europe to the US? Do you think there's like a European kind of comedy that you can feel when you perform in Europe that's different from the US? Or
Yes, I don't know it. I mean, I just got to Italy, so I don't know it well enough to let you know. You know, but even within the U.S., there's all different types of comedy.
okay,
You know, and a lot of it's divided by race and class. You know, a lot of the rooms they used to call the alternative rooms. They don't really use that term anymore. You know, you could also call those white rooms. You can call those rich white rooms or privileged rooms. You know, they never did, but you certainly could, because if you look at the acts, most of them are white, most of them are well educated, and were raised with a good amount of money. You know, the comedy clubs, the comedians at those was always more of a real mix of people from many different income levels, and at the alternative rooms that was not the case, including the audience. You know, so but yeah, definitely, you know, England has different styles than the U.S. and New York has different styles than Los Angeles. Los Angeles in general, and this is a generality, you know, it's I think there's people with less jokes. It's more, you know, rants or sort of like long kind of storytelling, but not a lot of jokes.
okay,
And sometimes in LA it's more physical. You know, they're much more animated in how they perform. New York is more just verbal and maybe cerebral. And I think some of that is the audience. New York, I think, has the least patient audiences.
Okay.
And the fastest thinking audiences. I don't necessarily mean smartest, but fastest thinking. So they lose attention very quickly. So comics tend to have more quick jokes.
Okay.
You know, again, that's a generality, but I think there's some truth to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about the audience you saw in Europe? Like you perform also in
Portugal.
only in Portugal, maybe other places too, I think, right?
Yeah.
In Europe.
This tour, last week I did shows in Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Antwerp, Belgium, and Lisbon, Portugal, and then last night in Milan. They've all been great. Some audiences, Portugal, I thought the audiences were just great, but like very well behaved, so nice, so genuine to people, and very friendly, but very well mannered. You know, not rowdy at all. The U.S. the audiences tend to be drunker and rowdier.
Okay.
I think in general, and even East Coast to West Coast. Like in Los Angeles, I hardly ever see anyone heckling anyone. In New York, there's constant trouble.
In Europe, did you perform in like theaters or theater-like places?
It's been
or?
a real mix. You know,
Okay.
Lisbon was a very big theater. I think there were a few hundred people there. Beautiful old theater from 1924. Antwerp was a little bar cafe where I think there was like 65 people squashed into a room that probably holds 30. It was great. And then one was a comedy theater in Amsterdam. And then in Rotterdam, it was a comedy club, a small comedy club, about 110 or 120. So yeah, it's a real mix that I do. And last year I did a mix. Last year I was in Berlin, Zurich, 2 shows in Barcelona, 3 shows in Copenhagen, 5 cities in Sweden. And again, there it was a mix also. Comedy clubs, theaters, then like little like bars, bar shows, and it's great. Sweden audiences are incredible, I think.
Okay.
They're almost like the perfect mix of good energy, but not too rowdy, and very well educated. And they seem to like a dark sense of humor too. So they're kind of they're kind of a perfect audience.
And is there a worst? Which one are the worst?
I don't know. I just don't like drunk audiences.
Okay.
Because I think they think even less. You know, when they can't focus. You know, like if someone's maybe a little buzzed, that's probably okay. But I prefer non-drunk audiences.
Yeah, that makes absolutely makes sense. And
There are not many American comedians doing a tour in Europe, or maybe there are. I don't know.
There aren't that many. I don't have an agent, and I haven't had one about a year and a half. So I book myself. And if I had an agent, I would not be here right now because they would never book me here.
okay.
And then if I wanted to book myself here without them, oh boy, would that be a thing. You know, they'd get all mad and then not want to talk to you. I mean, it's so stupid. But, you know, I like going to different places. I know the comedy scene here. You can tell me more than I know, but it seems like it's quite a new scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, very new.
You know, in the last 3 to 10 years.
Yeah,
you know?
10 years top, I would say.
You know, it seems like it keeps growing. And I like going to places that are new. And, you know, I think it's exciting what's going on in a lot of Europe with comedy being such a new thing. And definitely in some countries it's newer than others. In Italy, it seems like it's one of the newer comedy's newer here than it is in a lot of other European countries. I mean, it's also the same as some. Like in Portugal, it's quite a new scene as well. I think Scandinavia, Amsterdam, the UK and Ireland.
Yeah,
you know, it's been there for quite a while. But the rest of Europe, it's quite new.
Yeah, Mediterranean Europe, we didn't have stand-up comedy at all.
Tell me about the comedy that you have had. I know it was more like cabaret. Or,
Yeah, it was a lot of cabaret, and it stayed that way for so long. And I mean, I guess it was funny in the beginning, but then it kept being the same, I would say, and it still exists, and it's still the mainstream comedy.
Yes, because I think of television, because we were like mainly characters who did like 3 minutes act, and they had to say like a catchphrase every 30 seconds.
Right. The same catch.
Yeah.
The same catchphrase.
Yeah. And that was like.
Was it mostly one person or a duo act? Two
Depends.
people.
Could
Okay.
be one or two or even a group of people.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, that's.
And it stayed like that for years, and it's still the mainstream comedy. Like in general television, it's still the main
So
thing.
who's-
Now it's
Audience-wise, who is liking the more modern stand-up comedy?
young people who watch the American and English comedians on YouTube, and now
And
with
do you-
Netflix even more and more.
Okay, and do you watch mostly U.S. or UK comics?
I watch US. He watches a lot of UK.
British oriented, but I think maybe it's more thanks to Netflix too. It's more US comedy.
Yeah, I would say it's most
Okay.
US comedy. And also, this is a question.
Yeah.
You've been doing it for 30 years. Do you still watch comedy? Like, do you still enjoy watching comedians? And like, is there a comedian that when he's performing, you're
I
like,
do, but
gotta see
I
that?
actually rarely watch comedy.
Okay.
I don't watch it much.
And is there a comic that you're like, oh, he's in town or he's performing? I gotta see him.
I don't know, but there are some comics I like. I like this guy Gary Goldman. He'll have an HBO special out later this year.
Okay.
Ted Alexandro, he has a couple on his website, and then one with All Things Comedy, I think. Who else? Colin Quinn. I like his stuff. There's so many comics. David Tell. I mean, there's a lot of comics. And I'm leaving out lots of people, but I don't really watch that much. No.
Okay, so you enjoy it, but you don't have time. Because here's the other question: how many times a week do you have to perform? Do you feel like you need to perform or you want to perform?
I perform probably more than a lot of people because I don't know. I like to perform, and I do a lot of writing on stage, not just off stage. So the sets in New York City usually are anywhere from, they're usually about 15 minutes. They're really more like 12 probably. So the sets are, and then some clubs are a little longer, like 20. So let's just say 15-minute sets. I'll usually do at least 2 a night, and then weekends, sets are a little shorter. It's probably more like 10 minutes. I'll probably do 4 to 5 a night. And then sometimes I'll take one night off a week.
Okay,
So every day.
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Now, not everyone likes to do that.
No, but
I like to do that.
that's great that also New York allows you to do that, because in Italy it's like we've worked so hard that now we can go up like 3 times a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it reminds me of Los Angeles a little bit. I lived there for a couple years, about 17 years ago in the early 2000s. And LA does not have as much stage time as New York. It still has a lot, but not as much as New York. But I found that sometimes, and even when I was in LA, I was working on my act more off stage, writing or whatever, And in New York, New York is such a busy city. You get so busy with so many things. You're always running around. You're hardly ever sitting still. So I probably work less off stage. I don't work as much off stage as I should and as I would like to in New York. But in LA, because you don't get on stage as much, I think you work more on your act off stage. Now that may have changed some. And I think that's one of the reasons podcasting in Los Angeles got so big. I mean, when I lived in Los Angeles, podcasting didn't exist. It seems like so many of the comedians would never go on stage, and then they would hang out at the comedy club, but only 2 out of 20 are getting on stage. And then afterwards, they all go get drunk and they do karaoke all night. So I think at some point, when the technology happened, those same people that were doing that started doing podcasts. And a fair amount of them got hugely popular doing podcasts. And it seems like, there's some comics who they do more podcasting than they do stand-up, or they might be more known for their podcast than for stand-up. So it's interesting. So I think LA definitely has a bigger podcasting scene than New York. New York's is growing, but it's not where, I don't think it's near where LA's is.
Yeah, that's interesting because the New Yorkers are busy, so they don't have time to do podcasts.
Yeah, or they're just, doing shows or whatever. And I think the people in LA also in general might be a little more focused on the business.
Okay.
New York definitely has people who are too, believe me, who are as focused as anyone on the business. But I think in general, if you took a poll, there'd be a higher percentage of people in Los Angeles focusing on their careers and their business, where in New York, it's more people just going on stage and performing.
Okay. So, and now let's say a young comic that's starting in the US. He wants to do stand-up comedy. He lives in Nebraska. Would you? Where would you tell him to go? Like, because or would you tell him
I'll
stay?
I'll say this to anybody.
Yeah.
No matter where you live on the planet, if you want to start stand-up comedy, just start where you currently are. You don't have to wait. New York, I think, is one of the harder places to start because when you start, you have to do open mics. And when you start doing open mics in New York, there's usually never an audience.
Yeah.
The only people watching you are the other comics waiting to go on. So it's one of the toughest audiences there is. And when I started in New York, that's how it was. We are recording, right? I just want to make sure. Okay, good. All good? All right, great.
Yeah. No, I check
I've done things before where it's like not recording.
Yeah, no, that's my nightmare. That's.
So, like Washington, D.C., for example, has a really good scene right now.
Okay.
And a lot of it, I mean, they have a big comedy club there that's a good comedy club, but it's usually headliners coming in. So there's not a lot of room for local comics. But some comics and like a comic who's also a promoter, they started putting on their own shows in different bars. And some of those have gotten so popular, they've become full-time comedy clubs, basically. So they're doing comedy 5 or 6 nights a week, and they get a real audience. So if you're starting in some of the smaller cities like Washington, D.C., or maybe even Denver or Boston or Austin, Texas, you might get better stage time and just as much stage time, but it'll be better quality stage time because it's a real audience.
Okay.
So you can start. I don't know what the scene is in Nebraska, but I would bet it's not that bad because I know they have at least a couple comedy clubs there.
Okay.
And so starting your own rooms is the way to go, man, and just build your own scene. I mean, I think that's always organic, and it's not some chain corporation coming into your town and they don't even know things. It's people who really like comedy who are starting something. I think those are always the best rooms.
Yeah, I think that's how it worked the best in Italy because it first started in Rome and then Milan, I would say. But then the best is where someone who's a comedy enthusiast will start a small movement somewhere and then he'll start creating open mix and then inviting comedians.
Yeah, I was in Berlin twice last year. They have a great scene. Comics there were telling me they can get up once a night, maybe even twice a night at open mics where there's an audience, and it's all in English.
Yeah, that's the thing because
so
they can do it in English.
Might be a better city to start comedy than many cities in the United States.
Yeah, probably, yes. Also, I think Amsterdam is like that.
That's amazing.
Those are places where you can do it in English. Here, there is an English comedy scene.
Oh, there is?
Yeah, it's still very small. And we perform there sometimes, but it's very, very small because Italians don't really want to hear a show in English from Italian comedians.
Sure.
So it's only for expats and English teachers in Rome, and it's mostly for those people, I would say. So yeah, I don't know how bigger it can get. Not as big as in Berlin or in Amsterdam.
Reminds me of France in a little bit.
Just better, sages for
but I'm saying Italy in general reminds me of France in a little bit. In a sense where both countries have so much pride.
Yeah.
They take pride in their food, they take pride in their whole country, so they don't want to speak another language. They want to speak their language. And I think some of the smaller countries and you guys are also both big countries, they're they're sort of forced to speak, especially if it's a place where there's a lot of tourism. They're almost forced to speak, English, which has sort of become like an unofficial second language throughout a lot of the world. So this food's really good, man.
Oh, that's great. See, better than French food, I would
good.
say. Now that we're, I mean, I just throwing it out there.
Another question. Do you think that you can, like in the US, you can live only by doing stand-up?
What's that?
Can you live only by doing stand-up in
Yes,
US?
you can. It's not easy, but you can. Yeah.
Even only without touring, I mean, only in New York, or you have to, I don't know.
You can make a living doing just stand-up in New York City, but it's very, very difficult because New York is so expensive. And the comedy clubs in general in New York don't pay very much.
Okay.
In LA, they pay even less.
Can I ask?
I'll tell you. The average pay for a 15-minute set at a comedy club in New York City, Sunday through Thursday, is going to be $20 or $25.
Okay.
On a Friday and Saturday, the average pay is going to be $75. Some clubs may pay $90, some may pay $100, some may pay $125.
Okay.
That's per show. So
For 15
the
minutes.
rent in Manhattan, right, for a 15-minute spot.
Okay.
The rent in Manhattan for a studio apartment, which is just one room.
Okay.
So, and that might be, it's very small. It's trying to think how big it might be. Might be 12 feet by 12 feet. So that's maybe, let's say, 4 meters by 4 meters.
Okay.
Wow.
Not big.
And that in Manhattan, that's probably going to be anywhere from $2,000 to $3,500
Okay.
a month.
Yeah,
money.
that's a lot of money. That's too much
So
money.
it's disgusting.
Yeah,
New York
yeah.
has gotten disgusting.
Yeah,
and it's become a
did.
very difficult place to live. Yeah.
And
So you need to work every night. But like when you do the sets, you go up, you said pretty much 6 days a week. Do you get paid for those sets?
Yeah, I get paid probably for 80% of them.
Okay.
Sometimes there's a really good room. Brooklyn has some good shows, and even Manhattan has some good shows where they're once a week shows at a bar, in a back room at a bar. And the audience is mostly locals. Most of the comedy clubs in New York, it's probably at least 50% tourists.
Okay.
Of the comedy clubs. But the shows that are these once a week shows produced by comedians generally get pretty much just people who live in New York.
Okay.
Sometimes those shows are really good, but they often don't pay.
Okay. So most of the job is going on tour. Like that's.
If you want to make money, you pretty much have to go out of town.
Okay.
Yeah. When you go out of town, you basically get paid what you're worth, how many tickets you sell.
Yeah. Okay.
That's basically what you get paid.
That's fair enough. I guess that's fair enough.
In the city, that's not really how it works for the most part.
And so now, because you don't have an agent, because you are, if I may, big enough that people will call you.
No,
on,
it's just I don't know all the reasons, but I had an agency that I was working with for years, and they were good for a while, and then after a while they weren't good, and so I'm not going to go into details, but I'm not working with them anymore, and I don't know who I want to go to at this point, and I haven't even been looking, and I've actually been enjoying booking myself and sort of seeing what goes on, and agents in New York take 10% of whatever you make, and many comedians have an agent and they have a manager, and the manager also takes 10%, whether they get you the work or not.
Okay.
So you can get all the work yourself, and they'll both take 10% each.
I see.
So sometimes people ask me, what's the difference between a manager and an agent? And I tell them, well, an agent takes 10% of your money, and the manager also takes 10% of your money. That's the difference. You have one person taking 10%,
And then another person.
and then you have another person taking 10%.
So-
and that's the difference between an agent and a manager.
So that's a solid 20%. That's
yes.
great.
Yes. So, and for many of the stuff that they book, some of them do earn their money.
Okay.
A lot don't. You know, a lot of the work is, I think, maybe deserves 5% of the pay. 5% of your money,
Yeah.
not 10%.
I don't know.
Some might earn it, some don't.
Another question about how long can you tour with the same show without renewing your material?
Great question. And that's changed a lot. That's another big, huge change. The audience, and some of this I think is just culture, where people constantly want new stuff. They just want new stuff. You know, we're a consumer society worldwide. People just want more and more and more. People want to hear a new show constantly. So if you're touring, I think, you know, if you're going back to that same city, you're probably going to want to have different material. It didn't used to be that way as much. It could be maybe a mix, you know, or it might be 50-50, you know, but now it seems like people are very demanding and want all new stuff. It's the opposite of music. When people go to see music, they don't want to hear any new shit.
Yeah, that's
They
true.
just want to hear the same old 5 songs. But in stand-up, they're like, hey, what the fuck? I heard that joke before. You asshole, I want my money back. You know, it's so... But, you know, that's okay. You know, it's for a comic, it's good. It makes you create more stuff. Now, some comics, I think, take advantage of that. They just use it as a way to make money, where they're touring with a new act, but it may not be a good act.
Yeah.
You know, but they'll put a new one out every year because they're going to make so much money.
And what about you? I mean, you improvise a lot, so maybe for you it's different.
Right. So when my Netflix special came out, it was about a year and a half ago. I still was touring. You know, I still have tons of material that I haven't put out on an album or a special before. So at the beginning, I was doing a mix of crowd work and a lot of that old stuff, and any new stuff I had already done. You know, I may have had 20 minutes of new stuff, hours of old stuff that have not been released on an album or special, and then you know, crowd work where I can do a lot. So, but now, you know, I have you know, probably well over an hour and a half of new material since my stand-up special came out. So I will be making another one in the next few months. I don't know. I'm going to make it on my own. I mean, my last one I made on my own, and my agent at the time sold it to Netflix. And this one I'm going to make on my own as well, and then I'll see who wants it. You know?
Okay.
So.
And do you think Netflix is more, because I don't think Netflix doesn't give you the numbers, right? Doesn't
No,
tell
they're
you.
very secretive.
Yeah. So, but do you think, because from the outside it feels like Netflix is now the thing that everybody is watching? Like, I don't know, like at least from Europe, Showtime special we don't get, HBO specials we don't get, Comedy Central specials we don't get. So we have to download it or streaming. But Netflix we get it. So does it feel like Netflix is the way to go, to you at least?
In the U.S. right now, if you asked me that 2 years ago, I would have said yes.
Okay.
Now I think everyone doesn't know what to do.
Okay.
Because I think many comics feel Netflix is oversaturated. There's too much.
Yeah.
It's so easy to make something for them. And because they have so much content, who knows if people are going to see it or watch it. It can get lost, you know. The great thing about Netflix is that it's in so many countries, and that if you subscribe to it, it's 24 hours a day. You know, you don't have to tell someone, hey, it's going to be on Friday.
Yeah, that's
It's going to be on Friday at
game
midnight.
changer, yeah.
When's it repeating? I don't know, but this Friday it'll be on. You know, you can always just tell someone, you want to see it? All right, go to Netflix. It's there, which is great. So,
Yeah.
But I don't know, you know. People are starting to release stuff on different platforms and different channels, and I don't know which one. I don't know which one's the best. Maybe Netflix is still the best, but I don't know.
Because maybe sometimes I think because I think YouTube sometimes I think maybe the way to go, because you put it.
I think YouTube's great.
It's for free. You put it there. You don't get money for it.
But for YouTube, you have to be a good marketer or networker or self-promoter. Because if you're not, people won't necessarily find it.
Yeah, it gets lost.
So, and I've never been good at that. I've never been good at networking, at promoting, none of that stuff, and I'm still not good at it.
Okay.
So, I put up clips this year on YouTube, and they've gotten maybe 1,000 views. So they don't go viral. I've never had a video go viral. So, for someone like me, who's not good at the self-promotion and doesn't do that much social media, having a platform for me, I need that help.
Okay.
So but right now it's like, I mean, I'll definitely pitch to Netflix again, but as far as which one's the best, I don't know. I would go for Netflix again.
Yeah.
But I don't know which one's the best.
Okay, and now another question that's a little bit different. You're a comedian, like you're a stand-up comedian, but you have acted a lot. Like you've been in a lot of movies, and of course in 30 Rock. How does it go? When did you decide, hey, let me try this out? Did you ever wanted to be an actor?
Say that again. I missed the last part. When did I want to do what?
Yeah. When did you decide to try and be an actor, to act?
Oh, well,
how did it happen?
I'm going to go back a little further.
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid, I used to do filmmaking. I'll wait for that glass. I used to do filmmaking when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I used to do animation. I use my own drawings and animate them and clay animation. And then I did some short, live action animation. I mean, just filming. So I often consider acting just a part of filmmaking. Just like doing the camera, the sound is a part of filmmaking. Acting is a part of filmmaking. So, I really looked at it as mostly as a financial thing. Because if you're able to act on some TV or movie stuff, you can get health insurance, and then you can also get paid. And so I looked at it as a way to make money, and also a way to get your name out there and get exposure. Like, hey, if people see me on this, maybe they'll come see my comedy shows. That's how I always kind of looked at it. I mean, I also looked at it as an art form, but it was also, survival, and I'm still doing that. Recently I've been doing a fair amount of voiceovers, and one of the reasons is, if you're just doing stand-up comedy, that doesn't come with any health care or anything, so, but if you're an actor, it does.
I never thought about it in terms of healthcare.
Yeah. I'm like, I got to get some acting gigs this year so I can keep my health care.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll lose my health care insurance.
Yeah, right. That's
crazy.
Yeah, that's a very American way of seeing it. But of course, I guess you should see it that way.
You study acting, or it's just natural?
Not really. I took one class in school, but it was only once a week, and it wasn't very good. And but I used to make a lot of student films, and I used to act in some student films. So I just kind of learned by doing. And then my first professional acting work was in TV commercials, and then little bit parts in movies and TV. And I'm trying to get back into doing some acting now. And I'm doing a little bit here and there, but I want to do really interesting things, and in filming I did before, I was in some really interesting movies, playing very different roles, no hat, no glasses, hair cut off, dyed, I did this movie American Splendor, if nobody's seen that. It came out in 2003, stars Paul Giamatti. It won Best Picture at Sundance Film Festival.
Wow.
It won the Fipresci Award at the Cannes Film Festival. I was nominated for Best Supporting Actor at the Independent Spirit Awards, which is sort of like the Oscars for independent movies in America. That's a really, really interesting movie, very creatively made. I also had a big part in that, and I also had a little part in The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke.
Yeah, sure.
I looked different in that. No glasses, no hat. My hair's long. It's pulled back. I'm wearing like a big hockey uniform. I'm playing a wrestling promoter.
Okay.
In that. There's one scene where Mickey Rourke's character is at the autograph signing, and it's really depressing. I'm the guy who's running that whole autograph signing.
Okay.
And I've done some horror movies. I love horror movies. Those are, to me, always so much fun to do. But, as I get older, you want to really pick and choose what you do even more carefully because there's only so much time, So, filmmaking can be a really slow, boring process.
Yeah.
It's a lot of waiting around. So, it's turned out all right, this place. Whenever I do something, like if it's acting, for example, I always find and learn things there that I can bring into my stand-up also. I've written a couple. I've made 2 books.
Yeah, one I heard about it, like how to beat anyone.
How to beat up anybody.
How to beat up anybody.
Instructional karate book.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously comedy. It's not serious. But it's.
I figured.
And then I did another book of cartoons and drawings.
Okay.
And some of those are political, some are just funny, and some are just like really weird. That's called If the Raindrops United. And so I like doing things in all different areas, but stand-up is always the main thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like when you like in 30 Rock, right, you played a character which was a comedy character, like and how much of the lines that you had to say is how much were made by you?
Season 1 they let me improvise around a little bit, and by season 2 there was very little.
Okay.
And then after that there was pretty much zero improvising.
Okay.
Sometimes they'd actually tell you how to say the line.
Oh.
It was very pre-thought out. They had already thought out the entire thing. So you were just kind of like a puppet or a piece of clay, and you just do whatever they tell you.
So you just have to trust the writers.
Yeah. So that's so it changed as it went along. Yeah.
I see. So I think it's like it could be frustrating for an author, a writer to.
It can be, yeah. It can be, yeah. Sometimes it's fine, but sometimes you're like, it's not the way I would do it, but you can't do it that way. Yeah. So it's a mix.
I see. Okay, this is just a fun boy question because I really love 30 Rock.
Yeah.
So can you, I don't know, can you share something like something funny that happened in when you were doing that, or something something awkward that you never said before? So it's kind of only here. Yeah.
only here in
Trastevere. Only Italy. Yeah.
Only in Italy.
Well, I don't know. One thing just came to my mind. It's not necessarily funny. It's just an anecdote. Was Tim Conway. He just passed away recently. I think he was in his 80s. He was a sketch comedian. He was on a show called The Carol Burnett Show, which was a very popular sketch comedy variety show in the 1970s in the U.S. And it was hilarious. I think he was hilarious on it. So on one episode, he guest starred. I think he was late 70s at this point. And he was so fucking funny. But I don't think he had been on TV in, 20 years or something. And it just made you angry, because you're like, this guy hasn't gotten less funny. He's still hilarious, and he's not working.
Yeah.
And he used to be one of the most famous actors, comedians in Hollywood. And to me, it just shows you how fucked up the business is.
Yeah.
Because
doesn't
he's old.
matter if you're
because
funny.
he's old. No, being funny has nothing to do with show business, unfortunately. And I think it has less to do with show business now than it used to. There was always bullshit in show business, but I think there's even more now.
Okay.
I think the business has gotten bigger. The comedy business is much bigger now than it was when I started, and it's gotten much more corporate. And that's show business in general. It's very, very corporate now. So I think it's difficult to make something good because most of Hollywood is not looking to make something good. They want to make something that makes money.
Yeah.
But they don't view quality as something that's going to lead to money.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. I think that's.
So when it comes to the agent and stuff like that, it's like, I'm fed up with a lot of the business. It's like, what's the point of having one? They're going to book me in some places I want to book, but they're also going to book me in places I don't want to perform at. And so it's a very weird thing. I don't. It's a poorly run business, show business, and the comedy business. And it's not about quality. It really isn't. An agent in the U.S., they will pass up a good comedian for an Instagram model in a second.
Yeah.
And they don't care, and they don't. This is how crazy the comedy business is in the U.S. Most of the comics are in New York and L.A., and most of the well-known comics are in New York and L.A. And in New York and L.A., the agents hardly ever go out to see comedy. In L.A., they see it more than they do in New York, but they hardly ever go out to watch comedy. But once a year, there's a comedy festival in Montreal, which is in Canada.
Yeah.
And also, they don't speak English there. They speak French.
Yeah, speak French.
Now, some of them speak English also, but their main language is French, and they prefer French. So, once a year, for 1 week, pretty much all the agents and managers in the United States leave the United States, go to another country,
A French-speaking country
where they don't speak English, to watch American comics. And usually when they go there, they're not even watching them. They're just networking amongst themselves.
Yeah,
And you tell me, is that any way to run a business?
No,
I don't think so.
That's absurd. Okay.
So it's a frustrating business.
It's a frustrating business. Maybe on this.
So I just focus on the art.
Yeah.
I don't focus on the business much. I should focus on it more, but I don't like the business. I like doing the art. And like I said, if I had an agent right now, I wouldn't be here talking to you.
Yeah.
Because, one, they wouldn't even book me in Italy, And two, the podcast, it doesn't pay anything. Why does an agent want me doing this?
Yeah.
They'd be like, if you want to do that on your own, go ahead. But we're not going to get involved, And why go to Italy where it's an untested market? You don't know how many tickets you're going to sell. You don't know how much money you're going to make. You're just going there. They don't want to be involved in that.
Okay. So focus on the art. This is the message.
That's what I do.
This is the message at the end of the podcast. And maybe because I think they're almost kicking us out.
Business is you can do.
Yeah, so we can stop.
I'm not a business guy. I can't give advice on that. But I will say, if you're good at networking and you're good at the business, you'll probably be much more successful than someone who's not. That's all I'll say.
Okay.
I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I'm saying
It
that's
is
factual.
what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think
we're wrapping it up?
Yeah,
well, because I think
they're kind of closing.
beyond that, that's it. I think they're closing, so you can finish your meal. So thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, man. This has been great.
Judah will be Friday at the Parioli Theater in Rome, and Saturday, the day after.
And like I said, I'm not on social media much, but you can find me on there, Judah World Champ, JUDAH World Champ.
Ok, thank you very much again.
Yep.
Ciao a tutti, ciao a tutte, alla prossima puntata.